When I was 19 and just starting university, I was coming home from one of my late night classes. I believe it was 7 to 10 p.m. I used to take the subway from downtown to a mall where I parked my car for the day, usually, and then drive home from there. I was on the last leg of my trip home. It was almost 11 p.m. and I usually look around when I enter a car since I like to be aware of my surroundings. I notice an older man, at least in his 50s, 6 feet tall, medium build, just sitting at the other end of the car, but I think nothing of it and take out a book to pass the time. I don't know why, but as I'm reading, I look up every once in a while. And I notice that he's progressively gotten closer to me. Soon, he's sitting 2 seats away from me and he starts asking me innocent questions. Like, what are you reading? What's it about? Where are you headed? He's now sitting right beside me and I can feel my heart beating quickly. I can't explain why he didn't say anything explicitly. That made me feel he would hurt me, but something in my gut told me to be very afraid. I entertained the questions about the novel, albeit being very short with them, and lied about where I was going. When I got to my stop, which was the end of the line, I grabbed my keys and put them between my fingers and beelined it to my car. I was too afraid to fully run out of fear he would chase me. Thankfully, I made it to my car and locked the door before taking 5 minutes to calm down before driving home. I used to work at a discount store. Worked there for a year. I started on register, but because I wasn't as fast as they wanted, they moved me to fitting room, which I preferred. While working one night, we were getting close to closing time, so it was pretty slow. I was arranging the hangers accordingly, and a man came back to try on a couple things. While I was helping another customer, I saw him out of the corner of my eyes. He ran into the hall, bent down, and then rushed back in. I thought maybe he just dropped something, but when I turned, I saw his number on the floor. I had a slight weird feeling about it, so I wasn't really rushing to pick it up. Some time went by. Multiple customers came and went. I honestly forgot about him. My favorite manager, Dan, came back there and asked me to pick up the number. I was in the middle of grabbing it when I hear the man nervously laugh and say, "Oh, that's mine." I smiled and looked up, about to say not to worry about it, when I see he is only wearing a shirt. My mind does not handle things like that well. I have a dissociative disorder due to trauma, so the second I saw his package, my brain turned him into a literal cartoon. I quickly turned away and put the number back, and then the dissociation got worse. I just stood there in silence. No thoughts, no feelings, just blankly staring. I slowly reconnected with reality, and in my head, I said, "You're at work. Ground yourself. You have to come back. Do something familiar, something easy." I looked around and noticed the hangers, so I went back to organizing them until I was able to function again. I used a walkie to ask for Dan, but he had left, and the manager, Kevin, was there. I told Kevin what happened, and he came to the fitting room to confront the guy. I stepped away so I didn't hear the conversation, but eventually saw the dude angrily walking away. I walked back over there, and Kevin goes, "Well, I confronted him, and he basically denied it. He said that you actually went into the fitting room and looked in at him. So what happened was you and I interrupted him and physically showed him where I was, which is not far enough in to see anything unless the person is standing outside the changing rooms near the hallway. I couldn't even see the changing room doors from where I was. Kevin basically said he doesn't know what really happened and walked away. Kevin actually made me question myself all night. I thought that maybe my mind was tricking me. The next day, I told Dan what went down. He was mad that Kevin didn't do anything about it and upset at himself for having me get the number instead of him. He asked for a description and if I could identify the guy using the cameras. When I described the guy, he said it might be who flashed my coworker Liz a few days ago. I picked him out of the security footage, and that was when I saw that Kevin didn't tell the guy to leave. He wandered the store for about 45 minutes before finally walking out. He easily could have come back and harassed me or any number of things. Dan filed a report and printed out the guy's photo. I don't think he ever came back though. My parents used to work several jobs to make ends meet, so I used to go and stay at my grandma's after school. She lived not that far from my school. I used to take a shortcut through the woods. Her cottage was just on the edge, not quite in the woods, more next door. She had a huge backyard, and the woods began just the other side of the high wooden fence that enclosed her property. I loved staying at my grandma's. She had a swing set and bought me a sandpit and a little Wendy house to play in. One day, when I was 10, I started my walk. It was a fairly bright day, but clouds were rolling over. Once I stepped onto the forest path, the sun was shrouded behind a blanket of clouds. It began to rain and it got dark. Not dark like in nighttime, but dim enough to be very creepy. Still, I carried on. After all, the woodland wasn't big, and it was a pathway well traversed by people. I'd often pass joggers or people walking their dogs, so I knew I was safe. But today, I didn't pass anyone, not a single soul. As the rain got heavier and heavier, it got darker and darker. I was glad I brought my black raincoat. As I was now about halfway, I heard my grandma calling me. I thought it was weird because she was disabled and used a wheelchair. No way would she be wheeling around the woodland path. It was well worn and smooth, but tree roots often poked up and it would make it very difficult for her to get through. But I knew it was her voice, calling me, summoning me. I opened my mouth to call back, but then closed it. I'm not sure why, but I felt unsafe. Instead, I just followed her voice, running towards it. I knew the path well, so the darkness wasn't a problem. After a while, I stopped. I had seen something splotching, a tree. As I looked closer, I saw it was blood. A chill ran down my spine. For the first time, the woods seemed menacing. I'd always found them comforting. At first, I tried to rationalize it, but I couldn't. I thought back to my grandma calling me and the breath caught in my chest. What if she was hurt? What if she was calling for help? It was then that I heard somebody rushing through the forest. I broke into a run. I knew these woods well and leapt and curved through the trees away from the path. I carried on until I made it to a patch of thick bushes. There was a well-concealed opening in where the inner branches had been forced aside, but from the outside the little den was almost invisible. Kids would often hide in it. There's enough space for a few small bodies. I waited for a while before I heard something crashing through the woodland. Through the gaps I made out a dark figure in a black robe. In their hand glinted a knife soaked with blood. I held my breath, watching them. "Come out. Come out wherever you are," they said. I stayed where I was, watching them, hoping they wouldn't see me. They wandered around, searching for me. Finally, they walked away, but I stayed where I was, too terrified to move. It got darker and darker. The forest was silent. Then, I heard my grandma call my name. She called again. I slowly slunk down. Once again, I didn't call back, afraid the man with a knife would find me. Instead, slunk through the woodland, working my feel and memory. I had played in the woodland since I was old enough to walk, but never in the dark. Darkness has a way of making a place seem upside down and back to front. Only my grandmother's voice echoed, guiding me towards her. Finally, I broke through the woodland and out into the car park where a police car waited. I ran to a policeman who looked shocked to see me. I started rambling about the man and the knife and the blood and how my grandma was out there. He told me everything would be okay and sat me in the back seat. Eventually, he drove me home. My parents were overjoyed when they saw me. They threw their arms around me, crying. The police took a statement from me in my house, asked me if I had been in my grandmother's house. I told them I never made it that far because of the man with the knife. They asked me if I'd seen anything. I told them no, I had hidden, only coming out when my grandmother called me. The officers looked at each other, then my parents, then back at me. When they left, my parents put me to bed. I was completely exhausted but too afraid to doze off, so my mother agreed to stay with me while I drifted off. The next morning, my parents sat me down and gave me the bad news. Grandma was dead. A group of men had broken in and killed her. The police think that they were part of a cult because they used her blood to paint pentagrams on the wall of her little cottage. I broke into tears, wailing that if I had found my grandma before then, had followed her voice in time, I could have saved her. My mother grabbed my shoulders, looked me in the eye, and told me that grandma had been dead before I left school. She was found dead in her house, not in the woods. After they killed my grandma, they stalked the woods looking for new victims. They got a few joggers. They tried to get a man walking his dog, but the dog alerted the owner as somebody tried to sneak up behind him. The dog went for the attack, startling him, allowing both the man and his dog to get away and alert the police. I had been in those woods with not just one knife-wielding maniac, but several. One thing bothered me. I was sure I heard my grandmother calling me. I knew her voice, clear as day. But if she had been dead before I even left school, who or what was calling me? I was on a night out with a few of my pals. We were at a bar dancing and drinking per usual. Me and my friend go outside for a smoke, and there are two guys also smoking, but they were talking amongst themselves in another language. It wasn't the fact that they weren't speaking English that freaked me out. It was their body language. It's almost as if they were talking about us. They were gesturing towards us and laughing a lot. I didn't think much of it. They were probably drunk or high, or maybe both. We go back inside and I tell my other friends how I have this weird feeling about the whole situation. She laughs it off, and the friend I smoked out with didn't notice apparently. I think it's just my anxiety and me being silly. I have to stop thinking everyone is out to get me. My friends decide to go back to a house party, but I just wanted to go home instead. The friend I smoked with waited in a taxi queue with me for a bit, but my other friend was tired of waiting on him, so they left together. I'm not that drunk and kind of bummed we didn't stay out longer or go clubbing. I'm checking my phone and I hear the same voices behind me as before, speaking another language and laughing. I think, okay, nothing is going to happen. There's lots of people here. Just jump in a taxi when it's your turn and go home. But I think, what if they get in with me? Or try and lead me away? I need to stop thinking like this. They're probably just guys having a night out. I forget about them and go back to playing on my phone. I'm second in line for a taxi now, with this tipsy older couple in front of me. Before they go to get a taxi, the man gets my attention and that of the taxi rank person. I'm not sure their official job title there. And asks him to look out for me and gestures behind me and tells me to be more careful. At this point, I'm fully freaking out inside and out. Before I can ask what he means, and his partner gets off in the taxi. I'm thinking, what the fuck just happened? What were they doing behind me that made a stranger concerned? Or were they spotted harassing people early on? I knew my instincts weren't wrong, and I'm glad nothing actually happened, but it just freaks me out. Since then, I've become more wary